G'day, I'm Troy Dean, and welcome to episode 68 of the WP Elevation podcast. Our feature guest this week is Kim Gjerstad from MailPoet. Kim is one of 4 founders of MailPoet, which is an email newsletter plugin for WordPress. Think of it as MailChimp inside WordPress. According to builtwith.com, MailPoet is installed on over 94,000 websites as we speak. So let's find out how Kim and his team have used the freemium model to grow their business. They're now a team of 12, and let's have a look at some of the challenges that they've faced along the way. Kim is also very kindly giving away 10 blogger licenses of MailPoet Premium, which are valued at $99 each. So stick around for details later in the interview on how you can enter that competition. Stay with us. Let's elevate.
This is the WP Elevation Podcast, helping WordPress consultants elevate.
This episode of the WP Elevation Podcast is brought to you by WP Migrate DB Pro, the database migration plugin that allows you to very quickly migrate databases between WordPress installations. Our good friends at Delicious Brains, Brad Tawnard at Delicious Brains, they're sponsoring this episode of the WP Elevation Podcast. So right now, let's go and hear from one of their customers and one of their regular users and find out what it's all about. Hey, Troy Dean here from WP Elevation, and we have on the line here Jack McConnell from Voltronic. Hey, Jack, how are you?
Hi, good, yeah.
Excellent. Thanks for joining us and sitting up late in the UK here to join us on the podcast to talk about WP Migrate DB Pro. Before we get into that, tell us why database syncing and importing and exporting is important from a WordPress development point of view. Why does it even matter?
Well, it just takes so much time, really. I mean, the great thing about WordPress is so easy to use, but there's always that database thing behind it that helps it run, and, you need to somehow have a staging environment, a development environment, a live environment, and you need to make sure those things match up, and getting all that well synced can be a bit of a nightmare. So getting that right is really important for, your development workflow.
I made this mistake really early on in my career when I was developing something locally and trying some new features, new plugins, new page templates, and then I pushed it live and I didn't take into account that there was different content on the live site, and of course it didn't turn out how I wanted it. And I think that's a bit of a rookie mistake that can be made. Yeah,
absolutely. I think so too, and I've done that too many a times.
Yeah. What were you doing before you discovered WP Migrate DB Pro? How were you doing this?
I think I probably just exported it. I use MAMP in my local dev environment, and I think I probably just exported it, imported it using phpMyAdmin, changed the site URL, home URL manually in phpMyAdmin, and I think I used, is it Velvet Blues URL renamer or whatever it is. So it goes through and says, what's your old site URL, what's your new site URL, and it goes through and sort of looks through the database and finds it and changes it for you. But it's a bit fiddly.
So how did you discover, obviously you realised this was a bit fiddly and was taking up a bit of time and you were looking for a better solution. How did you discover WP Migrate DB Pro?
I think it was via Twitter, actually. I can't remember exactly how, but I think all of a sudden, I think it was just when the Pro version was launched. I think it was maybe a X% off, new product kind of sale, and I had a look at it. I thought, wow, this is pretty much exactly what I wanted, and I didn't realize that I needed it. I just, as soon as I saw it, I was like, yeah, this will really be great. So I got it straight away. I think I got kind of like the unlimited license straight away.
Awesome.
I never looked back.
So for those that have never used it or don't know how it works, just tell us briefly how it works.
So each site has kind of like a code. It's like a serial after the URL, like a unique key, really. And what you do is you copy that from one site into another, and you can set either site to pull or push from one or the other, or export, whatever you want. So you might have your dev environment, and you want to push up all the changes from your dev environment up onto the staging site or a live site. And you can say, okay, here's the key for staging site, drop that in there. I want to push this there. I want to copy all the database tables, or I only want to copy a few of them. I want to make sure all my plugins that are in my dev environment are copied across or not copied across as well. And there is an option for syncing up the media files as well. So it means you don't have to use kind of FTP just to push up a load of changes. Say if you just pushed a load of blog posts, then you can get all that to work as well.
Wow. It's fantastic, isn't it? And tell me about the serialized, for those that don't understand serialized data, tell me how the serialized data thing works, because that's a really unique feature, isn't it?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't really taken much notice of it myself. I just let it work.
Right.
And I guess that's kind of the point. But it just does a great job of search and replace really throughout everything, and just making sure that it's in the right format. It takes out all of the forward slashes and special characters, and just make sure it doesn't get messed up in transit.
Yeah, I think so. The way I understand the serialization is that if your URL is like 17 characters long on the staging environment, but your URL on the live environment is like 23 characters long, then it goes through and replaces the URL, but it also tells the database that this string is now 23 characters and not 17. So you don't get any kind of errors in the database, which is really clever, because just doing the old find and replace in PHP or admin's not going to take care of that. So the serialized thing, I think, is a really unique feature. What's the main benefit for you? Is it a time-saving thing for you, or is it a peace of mind thing that the data that you're working on in staging and live is the same copy?
It is a time-saving thing, definitely. It takes 5 minutes to do it the old way, and it takes 30 seconds to a minute to do it the new way, and you just kind of let it do its thing. You don't have to be there. You can get a cup of tea or a coffee or something whilst you wait. And it is a time-saving thing, but it's so much easier just to be able to kind of, when you've got lots of PHP My Admin and windows open, it can be a bit confusing which one you're in always. So to say, just to look at a screen and just say, I'm pulling, I'm pushing, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. It's so clear, and the design of the plugin's so good that it's so clear. It takes the room for error out, really.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope this inspires, because I know when I first started out, I wasn't doing staging environments. I was kind of doing the old cowboy coding, like coding on live sites and keeping my fingers crossed every time I hit save in my editor. So I hope that this plugin now inspires some guys to actually and girls to set up their own local development environments and some staging environments, knowing that they can keep their databases in sync using WP Migrate DB Pro, because having staging and development environments is really important. So, hey, Jack, thank you very much for spending some time with us and telling us your experience of WP Migrate DB Pro, and look forward to keeping in touch.
No worries. Thanks very much.
Thanks, man. All right, our feature guest this week is Kim Gjerstad from MailPoet. As I mentioned in the introduction, MailPoet is a free and a premium email newsletter plugin for WordPress. Think of it as MailChimp inside WordPress. Their freemium model has allowed them to grow to a team of 12. They were originally called What You Sent Is Just Awesome, Wysija, Wysija. And we talk about why they changed their name from that to MailPoet. Would seem pretty obvious, but anyway, good to get Kim's insight into that. The plugin is currently installed on over 94,000 websites, according to Built With. And I met Kim a couple of years ago at Pressnomics for the first time and hung out with him. And he's a lovely, lovely guy, and is very ambitious and is looking at building something pretty big with MailPoet. So, without further ado, let's go and meet Kim Gjerstad. G'day, Troy Dean from WP Elevation, and I'm very pleased to have with me all the way from France, I believe, my good friend Kim Gjerstad from MailPoet. Hey Kim, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yourself?
Awesome. I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us on the WP Elevation podcast. Now, you are in France these days, is that right?
That's correct. I've been based in France for the last 6 years.
Awesome. So what time is it where you are right now?
It's 10 p.m.
Wow. All right. So, and it's Thursday, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. It's Thursday.
Cool. Awesome. Well, for those that don't know MailPoet, we're going to talk a lot about MailPoet, and we're going to talk a lot about building a WordPress business. For those that don't know, MailPoet is a email newsletter plugin for WordPress, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in a moment. But before we get there, Kim has very kindly sponsored 10 blogger licenses of MailPoet valued at $99 each. That's an amazing prize. Stick around for details on how you can enter the draw to win one of those licenses. Hey, Kim, before we start geeking off about all things WordPress, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be the classics, right? I wanted to be first like a fireman, then an astronaut. And then as I got a little older, it was more, okay, maybe politics or history. So in the end, I just fell into the web. I was just too much of a geek. So.
And how did you discover the web? Like, when did you first think, okay, the internet is something that I can build a business out of here?
Wow, the first time I really got into the internet was but that was back in 1990. I think we got our first connection at home in 96 or 97. And then I was really interested in just design and print. And while I was looking for a job, my first ever job, it turned out to be an internship at a company doing web applications back in that was even before the first bubble like popped. So it was just the first real massive drive of the internet. It was exciting times.
Wow. Do you remember the first time you saw the WordPress dashboard?
I do remember the first time I was introduced to it by a friend, and that was in 2005. I believe. And back, I was already setting up, I had built my own CMS in C# back then. I had also taken a friend's CMS, which was in PHP. And when I saw it was really this 5-minute install, which is not really a 5 minutes, but the promise of that install was like, wow, okay. And then the interface was really just very simple. Spending a lot of time teaching people how to use WordPress can be a real drag. So if you can just hand them over something that they understand quickly, that's what sold me immediately.
Yeah, you're right. And I think the guys at Automatic, big shout out. You really need to update that 5-minute install because it's not a 5-minute install. Come on. I don't know anyone who believes it's a 5-minute install. Were you playing around with other CMSs at the time? Like, did you flirt with Drupal or Joomla or Mamba or any of those other ones back then?
No, we were in the projects I was working on. It was so either we built it ourselves or we had sort of custom-made CMSs. There was one or two out of the box that we had installed and tested, but it was nothing. It was really, I think WordPress was really the first big community one that I put my hands on. And of course, the community was also a major plus. Suddenly you had resources, you know, so wow.
I remember the first time I saw the plugin repository and it was like the skies had opened up and heaven had arrived, you know. I couldn't believe it. There was all this functionality for free and all these great developers supporting it. It's truly unique, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. No, it truly is. The repository has, I shared the same thing. I was like, oh my God, I can have a countdown timer to this. I can have a calendar here, and it was really something that was extremely tempting, and I couldn't have foreseen the commercialization of it back then, you know. And I'm still mixed about it because I mean our plugin is a freemium, and I love free. Who doesn't? We all like free. So I think the repo people have done a great job at keeping it free for the time being. So
yeah, we're going to talk more about freemium as the interview rolls on. But before we get there, how do you describe what you do in one sentence? When you meet someone for the first time and they say, "Hey Kim, what do you do?" What's your elevator pitch, so to speak?
Since I basically, if anyone knows a bit about tech, I'll say we're a newsletter plugin for WordPress, and then. Or if people don't understand, I just say I work in, newsletters or spam if you want. Or if some people seem a little confused by it, I just say, well, if you know MailChimp, think of MailChimp in WordPress. That's what we do.
That's nice. In fact, that's one of the things that they teach you in like incubators and accelerators. And when you're pitching ideas is to come up with, well, we are X for Y. So you are MailChimp inside WordPress. I like it.
Yeah, correct.
What does Kim actually spend most of his time doing day to day? Are you actually coding or are you managing people or what are you doing?
Well, that's a good question. We're a team of 12, and I'm a non-developer. I used to be, but a poor one at that. I'm basically a business dev, product manager, project manager. So a lot of my day-to-day is split in between several little tasks. And not one big task like coding or etc.
Sure. And how many, just remind me, how many founders are there or how many partners are there in MailPoet?
We're actually four, there's four of us, and one of them is a silent partner.
Right. Cool. Is that tricky, like negotiating with two other people who have a say in the decisions?
It is, and like many other businesses in WordPress, we actually had never really worked with one another, and I hadn't really. We got together. Actually, it all started because I met a guy at a party who did a newsletter plugin for Joomla, and I was like, really? And I checked up on his business, and I, with a bit of research and through friends, I got to find out that he was fairly a successful guy. And having used WordPress in so many different circumstances, I was like, emailing in WordPress is really always complicated and painful. And let's try to make it easier. So I convinced him, and two other guys joined. That's how we started.
Wow. Awesome. So it all started at a party, huh?
Yeah, and it is difficult to make a decision when it's much easier to start a business if you're 2 or 3 people. Going it alone is tricky because if you get down, nobody's there to help you out or encourage you. And 4 or 3 or above gets tricky because when this difficult decisions have to be made, democracy gets tricky really quickly. So. We've managed. We just gave ourselves a promise never to fight and to sort of agree. Of course, sometimes you have to be a little pushy. So I'm known to be a pushy guy, but
so you've learned to be pushy, yeah?
Yeah. Well, you have to argue your way out of things. So.
Yeah. Because you're pretty. I met you at Pressnomics a couple of years ago, and you're pretty laid back naturally, right? So. How do you go in those conflict situations?
Well, that's just a facade because I'm kind of an intense kind of guy. So, right, it's the thing is, if you really get upset or you really don't agree, just step back and take the decision a week later or a day later.
Yeah.
Don't confront people when you're all charged up. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Never.
It's really good advice. Just sleep on it because it's funny what a good night's sleep does. In the sort of the cold light of the next day, you realise it's all about perspective, isn't it? Something that seems so massive on Monday, on Tuesday can just pale into insignificance. Yeah,
and also you get to notice that you change your own perspective and ideas.
Yeah.
And you were defending your idea a week ago, and then the next you're like, you're totally right. I didn't see that before. So
my business partner and I have actually we've swapped stances on issues before. Like 3 months ago, we were arguing the opposite, and now we've switched. It's crazy. What's the one thing that keeps you awake at night?
The one thing that keeps me awake at night is that we just want to build a sustainable business where we treat our employees right, and we give them and ourselves the opportunity to succeed. And that's a whole bunch of different factors. So I could sleep over. Sometimes it can change, but the overall goal is that one.
Nice. And what do you do when you're not working? Like, do you have any downtime? How do you keep your head together?
That's a good question. There are usually things. I started yoga recently,
Oh, cool.
and actually yoga is just stretching. So you take an hour to stretch, and you feel really good. I'm a squash player, so I've been playing squash for 10 years.
Nice.
So I like to the courts.
That's terrible for the knees, isn't it, squash? My wife and I
Yeah,
play squash a bit, and it's really bad for the knees, man.
yeah, it is. And I also like to cook. So cooking is another one of these activities where you have to focus. Your mind suddenly has to structure itself a little differently. And there's you have to keep the time things are cooking. So you have to be prepared. You have to execute, and then you deliver. And when you deliver, you usually share it with people, and that's where you get all the recognition.
Yeah. Nice. And do you find, like, as you said, cooking is one of those activities where you have to put 100% of your mental focus into that, so you're not thinking about, what's going on in the business.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Awesome. If you could, this kind of ties into the question about what keeps you awake at night, but if you could wave a magic wand and fix one thing about the business right now, what would that be?
Well, we're a bootstrap business, and being bootstrap has its own difficulties. And now, I'm really happy we don't have people in our backs pushing for results. We have the luxury sometimes to say, okay, let's extend this project a few months so we get it right. But sometimes I wish I had a little more money to play with so we can accelerate faster. So it's trying to find that right balance. Today, we're pretty good. I could use a few $100,000 extra dollars. So.
Awesome. Couldn't we all? And so just for those who don't know what bootstrapped is, because there might be some new WordPress entrepreneurs listening to this, bootstrap comes from that saying where you literally pull yourself up by the bootstraps and get on with things. So bootstrap means that you haven't taken on any external funding or investing, that you've just grown this business organically from your own sales and your own revenue.
That's correct.
And that does give you the flexibility to pretty much do whatever you want, but it also does mean that you can't grow as quickly as you want to because you're just doing it from your own positive cash flow.
That's correct. It also has business has a lot to do with timing. And it has to do with circumstances and timing a lot more than one person would like to admit. We'd like to say, oh yeah, we're successful because we were awesome. Yeah, but we also came at the right time, at the right place, and did the right thing. So money helps you get to that right place at the right time quicker if it needs. Sometimes you won't have the luxury of time. So it all you have to find the right balance at the right place. So.
Yeah. All right, let's just take a step back a little bit into history. MailPoet was originally called What You Sent Is Just Awesome. Is that right?
That's correct. I'm impressed.
What You Sent Is Just Awesome. I remember because I just discovered What You Sent Is Just Awesome just before I got to Pressnomics. And I just discovered this kind of plug-in with this really random name, and I thought it was an interesting idea. And then I'm standing at Pressnomics, and I was chatting to you and someone else outside, and you said, I'm Kim from, we have a newsletter plug-in called What You Sent Is Just Awesome. I'm like, oh, right, I just discovered this like a couple of weeks ago. So how did What You Sent Is Just Awesome, why did you rebrand to MailPoet, and what was the decision-making behind that?
Well, it was quite simple. What You Sent Is Just Awesome, the acronym is WYSIJA, and that's just too difficult to pronounce or even to remember how to write.
Yeah, it's not quite WYSIWYG, is it?
No, it's not. And it was a fun name. It was a geeky name, but it was just it was actually kind of a case study of how not to give a name to your product. So after a few WordPress WordCamps, because we don't really meet our users until they're in front of us, and each time we notice people would be struggling with the name. So at that point on, we said, okay, let's go find another name, and it has to be easy. So.
And how did MailPoet come about? Because I think it's a beautiful name, MailPoet. I think it's actually a very poetic name in itself. How did the name come about? Did you brainstorm that, or did it just pop into your head?
Yeah, it was okay. First, we wanted to have a domain name that was available
Uh-huh.
or that was being sold at a right price.
Uh-huh.
The trouble is, we really want to have the word mail in it, and a lot of domain names with the word mail have been are already parked. So and we were like, okay, mail what, mail this, and then WordPress's own tagline is code is poetry. And so we were like, okay, mail poets, and they also had Code Poet, which is a website that's run by Automatic. So we were like, okay, mail poet, that sounds okay. And poet writing, and after all, a good email is about good content. So it's like our users can be poets as well. So that's how it came along. And the domain name was available for $6.99 a year.
Excellent. And so you didn't think about using the WP acronym like everyone else does, and myself included, in the name?
No, because we always thought maybe our business would expand outside WordPress. So we didn't want to have WP in there.
Let's talk about how you've grown, and specifically I want to talk about how you've managed to find the right people for your team. This is I didn't send you this in the script, by the way. This is I'm completely putting Kim on the spot right now. How do you find good people to join a team? So you're a team of 12. You started out as a really small team. You've grown. How do you know? Okay, two questions. First question is, how do you know when you need to hire someone? And the second question is, how do you then find the right person to sit in that seat?
Okay. We always need people. So I could hire 3 people tomorrow if I could. If the budget was there, I would. We can't. Right. So it's more, for us, it's more of a balance thing, money. As for finding the right people, hiring, we've had mismatches with people we've hired in the past, and there will always be mismatches. Now we've been able to sort of reduce that. Our hiring is a lot more, may I say, sophisticated. We take a lot more time. This is usually how we proceed right now in hiring. Instead of just, we ask for somebody to send us an email. We refuse CVs, like attachments. Then, so we have to read the email has to be a good email, a good motivation in it. Then, when we're happy with that person, we ask them to answer a few questions. We have like a little test, okay? In support, it'll be like user questions. In development, it'll be just a few coding questions. And then based on the results of that, then we interview. We do a first round with someone. When we were happy with that first interview, then we get other staff to interview. This process can last like 2 months, but better filter in the beginning and get the right person with the right cultural fit than like discover there on after, because training someone to join your team is just a lot of work. So
yeah, and the thing is that when you fire staff and replace them, that actually costs the company money, doesn't it? Because you have to go and retrain and recruit someone new.
It's also very demotivating. And then again, I mean, sometimes there's no, sometimes, I mean, there's some guys we split with, which I think they're great guys, and for some reason we didn't manage to make it work out. So we don't I try to keep a good relationship even with the people who depart or who we split from. So.
And how do you, one of the things that we've struggled with, and I think that we're still kind of coming to grips with, is making sure that everyone has clearly defined roles. Are you like good at saying, okay, well, this is exactly what your role is and these are the parameters in which you operate?
That's a tough one, because in a small company, depending on where the company is, what is the company currently doing, can suddenly change, And so we do ask for a lot of flexibility, and sometimes we implement some like processes, and then the next month they all change because suddenly we're working on something different. So it just takes a lot of you need to find people who can get out of their comfort zone, you know, and that can have different things that they're better at. So be more, flexibility is what we ask. But as we're growing, the roles are getting a little more specified and separated for the better.
And you guys, like a lot of us in the WordPress space, you guys are a remote team, so you have staff all over the place. How do you manage the communication, and how do you manage the kind of accountability of what people are supposed to be doing?
Okay. We use the same tools as most remote offices use. Like, we have a chat which people log in every day, say what they're working on. Then we have different chat rooms for different projects. Once a week, everybody has to write a status on a status of what he's been working on and what he will work on next week. So they usually write that on Fridays. And then on Mondays, we have a weekly where we all get online and then we exchange verbally. But those are only 30 minutes. So communication is key here in a remote office. You have to communicate in more than usual to fill in that void of not having the possibility to lunch with someone or go have a beer with someone. So it's tricky. It's not always easy, but I mean, if you hire freelancers that already work from home, they're used to being at home. So we all the people who we work with were all people that were freelancers. So they know the drill. So
yeah. How do you keep a meeting with 12 people to under 30 minutes?
Well, everybody has to write his status update beforehand. So we know what everybody's worked on previously. And so we only talk about the things that what we're implementing now is that I try to get somebody to do a demo of what he's been working on recently during those 30 minutes. So we're going to try to have somebody rotate, and then here's what I did, here's how it works, tell me what you think, you know? Even though if it's an unfinished feature or thing, they get to show. And that's a great way for everybody to acknowledge someone's work and appreciate and let him know, you know? It's good for the morale of each person demoing, so.
Awesome. Talking about features, one of the things that we all struggle with as WordPress product companies is knowing what feature to put into the product next based on the feedback that we get from our customers. Is there a particular process that you guys go through to make that decision as to what feature is going to go in the next version?
We operate with a tight feedback loop from the support team. So if we get too many questions on a certain feature, then we'll go and improve that feature. So we try. Right now, we're actually doing a big new version. So we're not in that constant release phase right now. But usually in a constant release phase, it's like 80. We call it 80-20 rule, where you spend 80% of the time improving what is already existing, 20% on new features. Now, what is a new feature? Well, we're in a freemium model, so what can benefit like 90% of the users, and what can benefit the users that could be paying for a feature but that are not yet paying for a feature. These are the two sort of ways to look at how to implement a new feature.
And it's a nice, beautiful segue into what I want to talk about with freemium. So you have the basic version of your plugin, which is really quite powerful as a free version. So let's talk about that for a minute, and then I want to talk about how you know which features to charge for and put in the premium version. But before we talk about that, let's talk about why you decided to release. Like, do you think you could have achieved the same results that you've got now without having a free version of the plugin in the WordPress repository?
Well, there's others who've done it, like Gravity Forms, and there's other plugins that have shown way. We didn't really have a choice in the sense that we wanted to compete at the scale of like MailChimp in the WordPress community.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they have a free plan. So we had to we had to compete with that free plan. So for now, I mean, it's hard to say what could have happened if it was only premium. But at the same time, we've managed it just being freemium. So we do believe in the model. Now, it's not always been easy, but we believe in the model.
You've had 3.2 million downloads of the free version of the plugin. Now, just to be clear also, that figure includes when people update the plugin who already have it installed. So, thank you, Automatic, for giving us accurate statistics. But how do you?
That's actually, I will actually stop you there because that's true. That's the download count is a bit of a vanity metric. What we count on is the active users. Now it's kind of hard to trace how many active websites have us, but we do have a few hints. And there's one actually Australian startup that's called BuiltWit that sort of has a robot that goes throughout the web and knocks on the sites and detects the technologies in BuiltWit. They estimate that we have 90,000 installs.
Wow.
By our own estimates, we do sort of calculate through after an update, we look at the download count on the repository, and we think we probably have 150,000 active installs.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at BuiltWith right now, and it says 94,138 active sites using MailPoet.
Correct.
That's fascinating. So giving away the plugin to so many people for free. We've been through this, not at that scale, because we target WordPress developers, not end users. So our user base is smaller. But what we have learned by giving away a free plugin to so many users is that it creates a support overhead. And that's why we have, like you do, we have a premium version of our plugins on the back end to raise revenue so that we can afford to sustain the free versions. So I guess the question is, how do you know what people are going to pay for? How do you know which features to keep and charge for, and which ones to give away for free? How do you find that balance?
That balance is very difficult. The only way to know it is to actually interview some of your users. So you take some people's emails, you schedule Skype interviews, and then you run them through an interview process. And through that interview, there are some templates of interviews you can do. They're very close to what they call the minimum viable product interview. So the minimum viable product interview. If you do find it, then that's what you have to figure out. Who are your users? Like, who are they exactly? Are they big companies? Are they small people? Are they bloggers? Then you sort of segment them. You sort of figure out what their budget is, and then what they're willing to pay for, what is critical to them. So usually people want to pay for people who want to take out the credit card and pay, it's to either save a lot of time or annoyances, save time or annoyances, or that they need to be making more money. So they say, oh, I'll give you $100, but what that solution will give me back in return is higher. That's when they value your product.
It's fascinating stuff. I know we talked off camera about Ash Moriah from Running Lean, and the whole customer interview thing is something that we've been doing ourselves as well. And the interesting thing I find is that how do you know when someone's just telling you what they think you want to hear? Because there's a difference between what someone will say and what someone will actually pay for, isn't there?
Yeah. It's almost impossible to ask anyone what they would pay, how much they would pay for something.
That's right.
The way to work at it is you become a salesman and you pitch in the interview. You can pitch your price and see that person's reaction, and then when they say, well, that's too expensive, then you start arguing why that what's the value for that price they're getting. And if in that argument you have with the person, you sort of you can note down what they've been, what are their arguments. And in the next interview you go again at it. You can do like 5 interviews like that and sort of get a sense of how much, what they would be willing to pay for, etc.
Where have you been learning the whole kind of lean approach to this iteration on product? Who have you, apart from Ash, who have you been reading and studying to learn this stuff?
Well, I've gotten we're transforming our business into more of a SaaS in this year. Instead of just selling a plugin, we'll sell so I've been looking at SaaS models, etc. And there is one website by a venture capitalist and a former entrepreneur called David Krok, Krok. And he has an article which is really like a mini book, which is called SaaS Metrics 2.0. And SaaS Metrics 2.0 is really an eye-opener on how to make a business a full SaaS successful business. So SaaS is service as a software. So you sell a membership instead of just selling a software.
Interesting.
Selling a membership, selling a service membership. So
interesting. So is this for entrepreneurs.com? SaaS?
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm going to put the links to all this stuff in the show notes because I'm sure a lot of people are I'm going to go and reread this stuff myself afterwards, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to find this beneficial as well. And now you were saying before the interview off camera, you were saying that you're looking at scaling MailPoet and building more of your own infrastructure in terms of sendability and tell me a little bit more about how you're handling the kind of infrastructure challenges there, because I imagine it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah, it is. It's sending commercial email is a complicated thing. There are no books. There are very few know how to do it. All the software around it is proprietary, so you have to pay for it. There's no open source software out there or free. So basically, it sort of all came down to what our users need. And we had noticed that maybe 30% or let's say a third of our support queries are related to deliverability or configuration or sending issues, So they're just the postman's not delivering, basically. So we were asking ourselves, well, how can we hire a postman for our users, maybe white label him, like Mandrill or SendGrid, etc. And after being in the talks with a few of those players, I went to seek out a consultant in deliverability to ask him his third-party opinion, just so we go in the right direction. He would take me right, and he just told me, well, look, if you're going to be at the scale of things you are, just build it yourself, and it'll cost you more in the beginning, but in the medium term, it will just you're totally flexible to do whatever you want with your own platform, and you own the technology. So we hired him, and we got an engineer with him, and we're building our own email infrastructure right now. So it's like a mini Mandrill, if you want, or a mini SendGrid, or a mini Amazon SES. So
wow, that must I imagine that must be keeping you up at night.
Well, actually, it's we have the right people on board, so I'm actually I'm not too worried about it. I'm quite excited about it.
There's the distinction, isn't it? If you've got the right people in the right seats, it makes everything else come together and allows you to sleep easy. That's a very good. There's a lesson in that for all of us. That's worth the price of admission alone, and for a free podcast, that's pretty good. Hey, Kim, we should do the elevation round, which is, for those that don't know, WP Elevation is a business accelerator for WordPress consultants. So how about I ask you a series of quick questions about freelancing and consulting, and you can go back to your days of freelancing and pull that knowledge out of your head and hopefully give us some quick fire answers off the top of your head. Sound good?
That sounds very good.
Awesome. Okay, so question number one is, what's the number one thing any freelancer or consultant absolutely needs to know?
Consulting's number one rule is that it's a give and take relationship. You, customer or client, you do 50, he does 50. If there's no balance there, the relationship is screwed. So you have to really set that expectation from the beginning. Otherwise, it will fail.
I like that. No one's ever said that before, and it's a good distinction. What's the best thing you've ever done to find new clients?
That's a good question. I've always relied on word of mouth. So deliver something that's slightly above expectation. So you can set the expectation lower at first, but then you just give the little bonus at the end.
Awesome. What is how do you stop competing on price? This is my favorite question.
Well, on price, that's really when you have enough. You stop competing on price when you're allowed to select your own customers and refuse that work.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. It's all supply and demand, isn't it? It's basic economics, right? Any tips on writing better proposals?
Oh, wow. Keep them short. Well, they're basically writing tips, right? Keep them short and readable and fun to read.
Hey, I like that. No one said fun to read before.
Humor if you need to.
Keep them short, readable, and fun to read. That's nice. I like it. Do you have a favorite tool or system for client relationship management? Oh, there we go. You froze on me, but you just froze on me, but now you're back. Cool.
Tell me again.
Do you have a favorite tool or system for CRM?
I actually don't have a CRM, and it's just been my email inbox. That's all it's been. So that's it.
I've spoken with some CEOs of very large companies who say Gmail is their CRM.
That's about right.
Yeah. What's the best way to keep a project and a client on track?
It's about setting. It's that relationship you set in the beginning. I'm going to deliver on the promise that you delivered this on time, and keeping that is a constant reminder. So I don't know. It depends how long your project is, but if it's like the project will last for 3 months, then you just set up a weekly talk with the client where we have on Fridays our weekly talk. This is what we had to do. This is what I had to do. This is what you had to do. Are we late on this, and why are we late? So it's just a good communication, just enabling a good communication between you and your customer, and officializing it by adding a recurring event in the calendar.
Yeah. That's great advice, and it's something that I see so many people, and I've done it in the past myself, is when you go into development mode and you put the blinkers on and you're in the dark room coding away and you've got 2 weeks of code to do, your client doesn't know that you're really busy working on their project, and they just need a regular update to make them feel comfortable that something's being done.
Correct.
Yeah. Good advice. Any ideas for getting referrals from existing customers?
Yeah, well, if you're, that's a good question. The best way to get a good referral is to have one page on your website, which, the thing is, if you're gonna present yourself, you have to have a one-pager online. I always like, for example, about.me, which is just a one-pager mini CV style, straightforward and honest. And you can ask your customers just to go to this page. This is what the guy does. Here's the photo of the guy. he's or girl, he or she is nice, and that's it, you know. But have maybe a one-pager sort of CV somewhere on your sites.
I love About.me as well. I was one of the first people to sign up for that, and and it's just and it's gorgeous. It's beautiful. I love it as well.
Yeah.
All right, final question in the elevation round. What's the number one thing you can do to differentiate yourself from everyone else out there?
Don't try to do everything. For example, if you, let's say, I've always been quite good at SEO, actually, organic SEO.
Right.
But I've never considered myself an SEO professional, and I never pretended I was. So, you know, I could say to the client, for example, hey, I know this much, but if you really want to reach your business goal, go see elsewhere, right? So just be honest with yourself, know your limits, don't sell the whole wagon, just stick to your guns and what you know best, and it'll work out better that way.
Awesome. All right, thank you for answering the questions in the elevation round. Much appreciated. What's the future for MailPoet? Where do you think MailPoet, or where do you hope MailPoet will be in the next 12 months?
That's a good question. I don't often say this publicly, so I kind of keep it under wraps. But we wanna go on a bigger scale. We want a product that can be used by really everybody. We're not quite there yet, and so there's the sending service. Doing our plugin right now. We're redoing our visual editor, the drag and drop interface where users can add their content. We've decided on the whole scale to up the level, and we're aiming for 500,000 websites in 2-3 years from now. That's what we're aiming for. So
wow.
Going
awesome.
5 times what we are today. Yeah,
Excellent.
It's a little ambitious, but rather have ambitious goals.
Totally, you have to be ambitious. Someone said to me recently, you're going to spend as much energy and work as hard to double your results as you are to 10x your results. So you may as well just try and 10x your results.
yeah, right. It's easier said than done.
Of course.
But that's about right, actually.
Yeah, of course. Hey, we should also announce the competition, and I'm going to throw you on the spot here again because I didn't ask you this prior to the interview. But you're giving away, you are very, very kindly sponsoring 10 licenses of the blogger license of MailPoet, which is valued at $99 a year. So thank you very much for that. Now, what I usually do is say to people, hey, to enter the competition, leave a comment under the video and tell Kim the number one blank. So tell me, what is it that you want to learn from our audience? What would you like them to, what kind of feedback would you like them to give in order to enter the competition?
Oh, it's easy. They can just write in what's their favorite newsletter solution and why.
Nice. And it doesn't have to be MailPoet. You're not going to get extra points.
No.
You're not going to get extra points for saying MailPoet because Kim's a nice guy.
Okay, it has to be, it can be MailPoet, where I just want the honest answer, but I just want to know why.
Yeah,
that's
cool. All right, so leave your feedback under the video. Tell Kim what is your favorite email newsletter solution and why, and I'll get Kim to swing by in a couple of weeks and award those 10 prizes. Thank you so much, man. That's very generous of you.
Pleasure.
Hey, it's been an absolute pleasure spending some time with you on the WP Elevation podcast. I really appreciate it. Where can people reach out and say thanks to you, man?
They can write at kim@mail.com.
Nice. Kim@mailpoet.com. Awesome. Thank you very much. And finally, who would you like me to try and interview and why?
I would really like to interview a guy you in this interview, actually. It's the author of the book Running Lean. His name is Ash Maria. And he's a great hitter, and he has a lot of tips for those who want to get a product out there. So it's more product oriented, but he has great tips.
He does. And we've actually had a little bit of mentoring from Ash, and so I'm going to reach out to Ash again. We did the Running Lean boot camp. I'm going to reach out to Ash again and definitely get him on the podcast because he is. There have been a few people who have recommended him now. So thank you for kicking me up the bum to remind me to get Ash on the podcast. Awesome.
Great.
Hey, thanks again for spending some time with us, Kim. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the best for the future of MailPoet, my friend.
Thanks for having me on board. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Troy.
Thanks, Kim. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the WP Elevation podcast with Kim Gjerstad from MailPoet as much as I enjoyed it. I've certainly got a lot of time for Kim and love chatting with him about all WordPress business stuff whenever we get the opportunity. Of course, this episode is sponsored by WP Migrate DB Pro, our good friend Brad Tauernard at Delicious Brains, and you heard from one of their users earlier on as to what that plugin is all about and how it can help you keep your databases up to date and migrated and in sync between your local development site and your remote site and all those good things that we should be doing as developers, of course. So check it out at WP Migrate DB Pro. I'll put the link underneath the video, or if you're listening to this and you're not going to visit the website, which of course you should, to subscribe to the podcast and do all that kind of cool thing. But if you want the link, just go to deliciousbrains.com and then click on the WP Migrate DB Pro link, and you'll be able to grab it there. And the pricing currently is $90 for a personal license, $199 for developer. That gives you up to 100 installs. That's nuts. And 230 installs with the Elite license, which is 450. So check it out at deliciousbrains.com, all about WP Migrate DB Pro to keep your WordPress databases up to date and in sync and migrated. Of course, subscribe to the podcast at wplelevation.com/subscribe, and we'll send you an email every Thursday morning with a link to the latest episode. And everything relating to this particular episode you can get in the show notes at wplelevation.com/Kim Gjerstad, which is KIMGJERSTAD. That's KIMGJERSTAD. And that will take you to the show notes for this particular episode, where you can get all the links and all the goodies that Kim and I spoke about. Hey, if you like this podcast, please give us a 5-star review at iTunes. It really helps us come up in the search results. And remember to leave your comment underneath the video and tell Kim your favorite email newsletter solution and why. And it doesn't have to be MailPoet. Just tell him what your favorite email solution is, seriously, honestly, and why. And you could win one of the 10 blogging licenses of MailPoet that Kim is giving away as part of this episode, and they're valued at $99 a year. Next week on the podcast, we have Sarah Pressler. I think it might be Sarah, I'm not sure. I'll find out next week. Sarah Pressler is a vintage blogger, has been around since the late 90s blogging, is apparently, according to the internet, is a very demanding, I'm getting this off the 2013 Denver WordCamp website, is a exceptionally demanding classical ballet teacher, has been a mummy blogger. I believe at one stage worked with Web Dev Studios as a technical project manager. If she's not still there, I'm not sure what she's up to these days, but we're going to find out on the podcast when I interview Sarah Pressler next week. So make sure you stick around for that. And until next time, I've been Troy Dean. Go Elevate.